question she asked.
Thank you. I had to do a little research this weekend when I saw what was coming up. Hadn't previously had to deal with the Home Rule Act here. Mr. Raskin, you seem to have some familiarity with it. Do you know how many times Congress has disallowed laws that have been duly passed by the District of Columbia?
But I believe 3 times that it's
That's-
happened, and the last time was relating to building height restrictions, where there's, a significant federal interest. But yeah, the basic premise of the Home Rule Act is the same premise of the Home Rule Act in all of our states, which is to devolve to the localities as much decision-making authority as possible so they can make their own decisions. And so it's a rare thing. I mean, I guess states will occasionally override something that a local government does. I'd like to take the opportunity just to say the criminal code revision, which is one of the targets here, doesn't go into effect until 2025 in D.C. So if we're going to sit as the super Washington, D.C. City Council, we clearly have enough time to have a real hearing about the particulars of that and compare it to the other states, provision by provision, to see if we think it's okay or not.
Well, with respect to that criminal code, the research I did indicated that this is something that's been in the works for 5 years, and they've consulted with experts because the last time they passed a criminal code for DC was 1901, so it's way out of date, right?
As I understand it, they're doing what a lot of states have done, which is to move to a model penal code-based criminal justice revision, and those always take many years to do, but they've got, everybody involved, the legislators and the local judges testifying and the lawyers and so on, and this is what they came up with, and it's subject to the democratic process, just like the laws are subject to democratic process in the states where we live.
So we've got 700,000 people who live in DC, and their duly elected representatives passed these 2 laws, went all the way through the process there, and now Congress is going to come in and say, no, you can't do these 2 things with respect to local elections, not federal elections, and with respect to your local criminal code.
Yeah, without so much as a hearing. And, but by the way, a number of the states represented by the distinguished members here have had non-citizen voting in their history. More than 40 states, at least 40 states, have had non-citizen voting. And the great champion of non-citizen voting was, of course, Abraham Lincoln. And the original theory of non-citizen voting was what mattered under the wealth and property qualifications and the race and gender qualifications was simply, did you own property? And your citizenship was deemed to be irrelevant. But it became a major bone of contention between the northern states and the southern states before the Civil War, because the seceding states were saying that the immigrant population was anti-slavery, so they wanted to disenfranchise them. And Lincoln stood up for it. And of course, when he won the election in 1860, a lot of them were saying it was on the strength of the immigrant vote, because in those days, non-citizens could vote not just in local, but also state and federal elections. What's happening in DC is just their council and their school board elections, which is the practice that survives in a bunch of municipalities around the country.
Including New York City, isn't it?
I think that may have been
Maybe not there.
overturned by the
But a
legislature,
number.
but certainly they voted for it. I don't know what happened to it. Yeah.
So what we're being asked to do here today is very similar to if Montana or North Dakota or any one of our states that has less than 700,000 people in it decided to set up its own election laws, and Congress said, nope, we think better than you. We're going to tell you how you have to run your local elections.
Yeah. I mean, I find that the insult is made all the more profound because the people from Washington, D.C. are being kept from voting for representatives to Congress. And then they're told, yeah, in your school board elections and your advisory neighborhood commission elections, you can't even allow immigrants to vote if that's what you want to do. And why would any of us care about that if that's what they want to do?
So going back to the crimes code that we're being asked to toss out after years of work, so the citizens of DC, through their representatives, have tried to revise their crimes code, presumably to improve the situation regarding crime in DC, and we're being asked to just throw out that effort.
As I understand it, and again, I hesitate to get involved into the particulars, but what they did was they looked to see what judges were actually doing, and then they set maximum sentences at a rate higher than what the average sentences were in their jurisdiction. So obviously nobody's more interested in getting rid of crime in Washington than the people of Washington and their representatives.
And also, if we pass this resolution, then we're going to say that everything has to stay just as it is, which Chairman Comer indicated is pretty bad. So if we pass this resolution, it's not going to get better. It does nothing to affect crime in DC.
Oh, right. Well, at that point, we're then in a game of, cat and mouse with the DC City Council, and they've got to try to figure out how they can do something that would escape the wrath of Congress. I mean, to me, there's just something deeply undemocratic about dictating to them their local laws.
Okay. Well, I would associate myself with the ranking member's remarks that this does not seem to be serious legislation. It does not seem to be directed at the issues that my constituents are concerned about. Certainly, from what I've heard ever since arriving in Congress, people are loath to interfere in local election rules, and I don't see any way that this helps address crime in our communities. So I don't see why it should go forward. I do think we should be taking up the DC statehood bill because, as we've said, there's 700,000 people who reside in DC, and they deserve to have their voices heard. I'd yield back.
Gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, is recognized for whatever questions he cares to